This is top 5 rackets that hold a boss in place, not the flashy ones, not the stories people brag about, the ones that keep the lights steady while everything else flickers. Let's start with the quietest one of all, the one nobody respects, the one everything else leans on, the numbers. Racket number 1, numbers. Bookmaking. A boss doesn't talk about numbers in terms of wins and losses. He talks about them in terms of weeks, because weeks tell you if something's alive. A weak numbers operation might move 10, 15,000 a week. Nothing impressive. Enough to keep the lights on. A solid one. Settled territory. No drama. 40, 50,000 moving through weekly without anybody sweating. The kind that doesn't change much, whether it's raining, snowing, or the economy's tight. And when everything's lined up right. Multiple crews, old neighborhoods, no competition left. You're talking 6 figures moving in a single week. Not profit, movement. That's the part people don't understand. Most of that money never stays in one place long enough to be admired. It circulates. Street guys take their share because they absorb the mess. Captains take theirs because they keep the rhythm clean. Small percentages move upward, not as a grab, but as a given. By the time it reaches the top, what the boss sees isn't stacks. It's reliability. Over a year, that reliability adds up. Even a conservative operation, nothing flashy, is moving $2, $3 million annually through the system. A strong one, 4, 5 million without ever raising its voice. The boss doesn't take that money. He skims certainty. His personal take is smaller than people think, but it shows up every single week like clockwork. And that clockwork does something no big score ever could. It lets him breathe. Because when a boss knows the numbers are solid, he doesn't panic. He doesn't chase. He doesn't reach. He doesn't gamble on things he doesn't understand. He sits still, and sitting still is power. The moment the numbers start wobbling, not crashing, just wobbling, he feels it immediately. Meetings get shorter. Advice gets sharper. People get quieter. Because when your floor starts to soften, you don't fall right away. You start leaning, and leaning is how bosses end up exposed. That's why numbers are protected, not because they're glamorous, because they give a boss something priceless, a baseline, a way to measure everything else against. When the street gets loud, the numbers tell you if it's real or just noise. When people start acting strange, the numbers tell you if something's wrong, or if it's just ego. They don't lie. They don't posture. They don't care who you are. They just keep moving, or they don't. And a boss who understands that doesn't brag about the numbers. He listens to them. Because as long as they're steady, he knows he's still standing. Quietly. Racket number 2. Loans, credit, where pressure lives. If numbers are the heartbeat, loans are the nerves. They don't move quietly, they hum. And when something's wrong, this is where a boss feels it first. Loans aren't about generosity. They're about timing. Nobody borrows when they're comfortable. They borrow when they're cornered. That's the whole thing. From the street, loans look ugly. Too personal. Too tense. Too many emotions involved. From the top, they look informative. Because debt changes how people behave faster than fear ever could. At the bottom level, loans look small. A few thousand here. A short window. Nothing that sounds impressive. But again, kid vision. Across a single crew, credit can move 15 to 30,000 a week. Easy. Sometimes more when things tighten up. Over a year, that's $750,000 to $1.5 million cycling through hands. Not all of it comes back clean. Not all of it stays. That's not the point. The point is, who keeps calling? Loans don't make you rich. They make you central. People who owe don't disappear. They don't freelance. They don't get brave. They show up early. They answer calls. They avoid attention. That predictability is worth more than interest. From the boss's chair, this racket isn't about squeezing. It's about observing. Street guys handle contact. They hear the excuses, the stories, the next week promises. They absorb the tension so it doesn't travel upward. Captains manage the temperature. They know when to cool things down, when to remind someone quietly, when to let pressure sit. Because pressure doesn't always need action. Sometimes it just needs time. The consigliere watches something else entirely. He watches patterns. Who borrows again too fast? Who stops answering for 2 days? Who suddenly needs help when they didn't last month? That's not coincidence. That's fracture forming. And fractures are where bigger problems start. The boss rarely touches this racket directly. And when he does, it's not about money. It's about permission. A loan approved from above isn't generosity. It's a decision that someone is worth keeping close. For now. Because loans tell you who's useful, who's slipping, and who's one bad week away from becoming a liability. That information prevents disasters later. Here's the thing nobody admits. Loans don't end careers. They expose them. A guy who borrows once might be unlucky. A guy who borrows twice is struggling. A guy who borrows regularly is already done. He just doesn't know it yet. From the top, this racket is a warning system. And warning systems keep bosses alive. Now let's talk about money distribution. Without fantasy, street handlers take the most heat, so they take the biggest cut. Captains take enough to justify involvement, not enough to feel tempted. The boss's slice is thin. On paper, it doesn't look impressive. But it shows up fast, weekly, sometimes daily, always attached to behavior. And behavior is the real currency here. Over a year, a solid loans operation might move $1 million. A reckless one moves more, briefly. But reckless credit creates noise. Noise creates scrutiny. And scrutiny doesn't stop at street level. That's why smart bosses cap growth here. They don't let greed outrun control. Because loans grow fast and collapse faster. This racket teaches a boss something uncomfortable. Everyone breaks eventually. The only question is how much warning you get. Loans give you warning. They tell you who's scared, who's stretched, who's about to make a mistake that brings heat to your door. A boss who ignores that information doesn't get betrayed. He gets surprised. And surprise is fatal. That's why loans are dangerous. Not because of violence, because they pull people closer. And the closer people get, the more carefully you have to watch them. By the time a loan's operation starts feeling unstable, a smart boss is already stepping back, letting captains absorb the noise, letting distance return, letting pressure burn itself out, because credit is a tool, not a foundation. Numbers give you a floor. Loans give you signals. Together, they tell a boss whether things are healthy or whether something ugly is coming. And ugly always starts inside. Racket number 3. Construction. Legit cover where noise disappears. This is the racket street guys hate. Too slow, too clean, too much paperwork, too many meetings with people who wear suits and talk in circles. That's exactly why bosses love it, because nothing kills a rise faster than being hard to explain. Street money comes in fast, it leaves fast, it asks questions later. Legit-looking money moves slow. It explains itself. It makes your life look boring, and boring is survival. A boss doesn't want to look rich. He wants to look accounted for. Construction, unions, no-show work, whatever shape it takes. This racket isn't about hustle. It's about permission. Permission to exist comfortably. Permission to stop answering questions. Permission to age in place. From the top, this racket feels like air conditioning. You don't notice it working until it's gone. At the entry level, the money looks modest. Monthly checks, scheduled deposits, nothing that raises eyebrows. But stacked correctly, this racket carries real weight. A single clean stream might bring in 30 to 80,000 a month. Layered streams push that higher without effort. By the end of the year, a stable setup moves $1.5 to $3 million quietly through legitimate channels. Not all of it belongs to the boss. That's not the point. The point is that it exists on paper. Street guys don't understand that. They ask, why not squeeze it? Because squeezing legit money breaks the illusion. And illusion is the product here. Let's talk flow, not tactics. Workers get paid. Supervisors skim. Middle layers protect relationships. Captains become diplomats. There they stop yelling. They start scheduling. They learn how to say nothing while sounding cooperative. The consigliere lives here. This racket belongs to him more than anyone else. He doesn't watch envelopes. He watches timelines, late checks, sudden delays, unexpected audits, subtle shifts in tone. That's where danger shows up first. The boss stays far back. He doesn't attend meetings. He doesn't make calls. He doesn't rush payments. He lets others be visible. Because the moment a boss looks involved in something legitimate, it stops being legitimate. Distance keeps this racket alive. Here's what this money really buys: time. Time to make decisions slowly. Time to let problems cool off. Time to wait out pressure instead of reacting to it. Strat money forces you to move. Legit money lets you pause. And pausing is how bosses survive their own success. This racket also does something else that's critical. It absorbs other money. Cash from the street needs somewhere to land, somewhere plausible, somewhere dull. Construction does dull better than anything. Payroll, supplies, delays, overruns. Nobody panics. Nobody asks hard questions. Everything looks like a headache, not a crime. That's protection. Captains get paid here in patience. They don't make street-level money. They don't want to. Their reward is insulation. They're farther from chaos, closer to explanation, harder to replace. The consigliere gets paid in leverage, knowing who matters, knowing who complains, knowing which relationships can't be rushed. The boss gets paid in stability. His personal take is thinner than numbers or loans, but it lasts longer, and longevity beats volume every time. Over a decade, this racket out-earns everything else. Not in spikes, in survival years. This is how bosses retire without retiring. Still earning, still relevant, still protected. But there's a risk here, and it's subtle. Legit money makes bosses comfortable. Comfort dulls instincts. When the checks are steady and the noise is gone, it's easy to forget the street still exists. That's when distance turns into blindness. And blindness is how problems climb past buffers unnoticed. Smart bosses never confuse clean money with safe money. They remember what it's for. It's not power, it's padding. And padding only works if you stay alert to what's underneath it. That's why this racket sits in the middle. Numbers give you rhythm. Loans give you warnings. Construction gives you cover. Together they let a boss breathe. But breathing too easily is dangerous. Because when legit money fails, it fails slowly and takes everything with it. Racket number 4. Cash businesses, where mistakes disappear. Every boss eventually learns the same lesson. Paper remembers, people remember, cash forgets. That's why cash businesses never go away. Bars, clubs, restaurants, any place where money changes hands all night, and nobody expects precision. This racket isn't about profit. It's about forgiveness. Street guys love cash businesses for the wrong reasons. They think it's about skim, about fast money, about loose counting. That's kid thinking. From the top, cash businesses are about elasticity. They stretch when pressure hits. They absorb shock. They explain inconsistencies without explanation. That's priceless. A boss doesn't ask how busy a place looks. He asks one question. Does it still make sense on paper? Because sense is the shield here. Let's talk real numbers, quietly. A modest cash business might move 3K, 7K tonight. A busy one? 10K, 20K nightly, sometimes more. Over a week, that's 25K, 50K moving through a single location. Yearly? 1 mm, 2 mm plus, without anyone blinking. Not all of that belongs to anyone. Most of it cycles. Some of it evaporates. Some of it gets explained as cost of doing business. That ambiguity is the product. Cash businesses forgive bad weeks. Rain, construction, staff problems, Seasonal slumps. Nobody panics. Nobody audits aggressively. A bad month looks normal. From the boss's chair, that's safety. Because spikes draw attention. Dips invite questions. Cash smooths both. Street guys see the register. Captains see patterns. Which nights matter, which ones don't. When something's off, and when it's just weather. The consigliere sees credibility. He watches how the business sounds when spoken about by outsiders. If it sounds boring, it's working. The moment people start talking about how busy a place is, that's danger. Busy invites curiosity. The boss stays invisible here, always. He doesn't hang around. He doesn't check in. He doesn't make appearances, because presence contaminates deniability. This racket survives on the idea that nobody important cares enough to watch closely. And that idea collapses the second someone important shows up. Cash businesses do something else that matters. They absorb other money. Street money needs somewhere to land, somewhere to disappear into the noise. Cash businesses swallow irregularities whole. Extra expenses, unexpected losses, equipment repairs, staff turnover. Everything has an excuse. That's the insulation. Now let's talk about distribution. Without fantasy, street-level people might skim. That's not the racket. Captains manage stability. Their job isn't to take more, it's to keep things boring. The consigliere watches exposure. He doesn't care about profit. He cares about whether the story still holds. The boss takes a thin slice, always thin, because squeezing here ruins the illusion. And illusion is the entire business model. Here's the part nobody admits. Cash businesses don't make bosses rich. They keep bosses safe, while other rackets do the work. This is where mistakes go to die. Bad loans, weak weeks, unexpected pressure. Cash absorbs the impact, so nothing reaches the top too fast. But there's danger here, too. Cash businesses can hide problems, even from you. If you rely on them too much, you stop seeing reality clearly. Everything looks manageable. Everything looks explainable, until it isn't. And by the time cash can't cover it, the problem's already too big. Smart bosses use cash businesses like shock absorbers, not engines. They soften the ride. They don't drive the car. The moment you start leaning on them for survival, you're already behind. That's why this racket sits fourth. Not first, not last. It doesn't build power. It protects it. And protection only matters if you still know what you're protecting yourself from. Racket number 5, tribute, kick-ups, where power is measured. Tribute is the last racket people understand. They think it's about money. It isn't. It's about agreement. Because nobody has to kick anything up if the system doesn't hold. At the street level, tribute feels unfair. You do the work, you take the risk, you deal with the noise, and someone above you expects a piece every week, whether things went good or bad. That resentment never disappears. It just stays quiet. A boss who forgets that doesn't last. Tribute only works when hierarchy still makes sense to everyone involved. The moment people start asking why, instead of how much, The racket is already weakening. That's why tribute isn't squeezed, it's maintained. Let's talk scale, the way bosses actually see it. A small crew might kick up $5,000 a week. A strong crew, settled territory, clean operation, $10,000 to $15,000 weekly. Multiply that across multiple crews, and suddenly you're looking at 30K, 60Ks a week. Coming up the ladder, 1.5 many somen, 3 meddlers. A year moving quietly, predictably. That's real money. But here's the truth nobody says. It's the most dangerous money a boss touches. Why? Because tribute doesn't come from systems. It comes from people, and people remember. Every envelope tells a story. Who's late? Who's light? Who suddenly needs an explanation? Captains hear it first. They know when a crew's morale is shifting, when resentment's building, when someone feels squeezed instead of structured. The consigliere watches tone, not totals. Does the money arrive with silence or with comments, or with justifications nobody asked for? That's how fractures announce themselves. The boss reads tribute the way farmers read weather. Not dramatically, not emotionally, just enough to know whether something's coming. A smart boss never asks for more. He lets others offer stability. Because the moment tribute feels extracted instead of expected, it stops being proof of order and starts being proof of fear. Fear doesn't scale. Here's another thing outsiders miss. Tribute isn't supposed to make the boss rich. It's supposed to make him untouchable. Because tribute means crews are disciplined, captains still matter, nobody's freelancing. When tribute slows, it's not about cash. It's about authority leaking. The boss's personal take from tribute is thinner than people imagine. He lets captains eat. He lets buffers absorb resentment. He stays above the irritation, because irritation travels upward faster than loyalty ever does. Over time, tribute becomes less about income and more about confirmation. Confirmation that people still agree on who's in charge, nobody's testing limits, yet no one's skipping steps. The day tribute feels heavy is the day something's wrong, and heavy tribute ends careers. This is why tribute is always last. It doesn't build power. It reveals whether power already exists. If the other rackets are strong, tribute flows easily. If the other rackets wobble, tribute becomes tense. And tension at this level never stays contained. The smartest bosses reduce tribute as they age. Not because they're generous, because they're realistic. They know the longer you sit at the top, the less pressure you should apply. Pressure creates movement. Movement creates attention. Attention creates problems. That's the final irony. Tribute looks like dominance. But it only works when dominance doesn't need to be proven. The moment it does, the system is already cracking. Numbers give you rhythm. Loans give you warnings. Construction gives you cover. Cash businesses absorb mistakes. Tribute tells you whether anyone still believes. Put together, these rackets don't make a boss powerful. They make him predictable. And predictable power lasts longer than violent power ever does. Until it doesn't. People ask how much a boss really makes. That's never been the question. The question is what the money does. Numbers give rhythm. Loans give warning. Legit money gives cover. Cash businesses absorb mistakes. Tribute tells you whether anyone still believes. Individually, they're just income streams. Together, they're a system built to hold still while pressure builds around it. Because bosses don't fall when the money stops coming. They fall when one layer stops protecting them. And nobody wants to say it out loud. Money doesn't make you safe. It buys you time to notice the shift. And if you miss that moment, the climb ends the same way it always does. Quietly.